Have you ever asked yourself why life feels so empty? Not because you're lazy, not because you lack goals, but because no matter what you do, nothing feels meaningful. You scroll, you binge, you consume content, ideas, experiences, constantly chasing stimulation. But the more you consume, the emptier you feel. Why? Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, warned us about this decades ago. He said modern life creates a special kind of suffering, not pain from physical hardship, but the ache of a life without meaning. And in today's world, it's worse than ever. Because now, we're not just distracted, we're overstimulated. We live in a constant state of input, notifications, messages, videos, news feeds, an endless flood of information, entertainment, and noise. And here's the paradox. The more stimulation you consume, the less you can feel. Your nervous system wasn't designed for this much input, so it shuts down. You get numb, detached, restless, but exhausted at the same time. It's not that you don't care, it's that you can't process everything anymore. You've maxed out your mental bandwidth, and when that happens, motivation dies. Because motivation isn't just about discipline, it's about desire, the desire to act, to create, to build, to connect. But overstimulation hijacks that desire. It replaces it with short-term dopamine hits. You scroll through 100 videos, 1,000 posts, 1,000,000 micro moments of distraction, and each one gives you just enough to stay hooked, but not enough to feel satisfied. Frankl called this the existential vacuum, a sense of inner emptiness that comes when life feels meaningless. But today, it's not just emptiness, it's overstimulated emptiness. We're not bored anymore. We're burnt out from too much meaningless input. And here's the catch. Your brain starts to confuse consumption with action. You watch someone else build a business, write a book, climb a mountain, and your brain thinks, I'm involved, I'm learning. But you're not. You're sitting still, absorbing content instead of living. And that creates a hidden depression. Not the kind that shows up in tears and sadness, but the kind that shows up in apathy, in scrolling past your own life, in drifting from one distraction to the next, hoping something will finally stick. But nothing sticks, because nothing means anything when your system is overloaded. Frankl believed that meaning is not something you find, it's something you create, through action, through responsibility, through contribution. But when you're overstimulated, action feels impossible. Your mind is too full, your body is too tired, your soul is too numb, and so you keep consuming, looking for the next thing that might wake you up. Another video, another post, another moment of entertainment to break the monotony. But all you're doing is feeding the loop. Overstimulation creates numbness. Numbness creates more consumption. More consumption creates deeper emptiness, and the cycle continues. This is not your fault. The system is designed this way. We live in an economy of attention where your focus is the product. Every platform wants you to stay, to scroll, to click, to engage, and so they engineer content to keep you hooked. But the cost is your soul, because the more you engage in passive stimulation, the less capacity you have for active meaning-making. Your attention becomes fragmented, your energy becomes drained, and life starts to feel hollow. That's the real cost of overstimulation. It's not just wasted time, it's wasted life. Frankl warned us about this before smartphones, before social media, before the algorithm took over. He saw it in his patients, in people who survived unthinkable hardships, but then faced a deeper question. What do I live for now? And in the absence of a clear answer, they drifted. Today, we drift too, but in a sea of distraction. And unless you see the trap, you can't escape it. Most people think burnout comes from working too hard, from hustling, from doing too much. But the truth is, most modern burnout comes from consuming too much, not creating too much. Your brain wasn't designed for endless input. Every notification, every post, every swipe takes a toll. A small one, at first, but they add up. And soon, your mind is flooded, overstimulated, not with meaningful experiences, but with fragments, tiny pieces of information, micro stories, flashes of excitement that go nowhere, and the cost is focus. Because real focus, the kind that leads to action, creativity, meaning, requires space, mental stillness, a moment to breathe, to think, to choose. But overstimulation hijacks that space. It fills every empty moment with noise, so you never have to feel boredom. But you also never have to feel depth. That's why you feel empty. Because stimulation isn't meaning, it's just activity. And when life becomes all activity with no purpose, you lose your sense of self. Viktor Frankl called this the Sunday neurosis, the anxiety people feel when they stop working and realize they have no idea why they exist. Back then, it happened on weekends. Today, it happens every day. We never really stop, but we also never really live. We're always plugged in, but rarely present. And here's the trap. The more you try to escape that feeling of emptiness, the more you feed it. You think, maybe one more video will help. Maybe one more scroll, one more highlight reel, one more quick laugh. But the more you chase stimulation, the more numb you become. Because real life can't compete with the algorithm. Real life is slower, messier. It requires patience, effort. The reward is deeper, but it's not instant. And when you've trained your brain to expect constant novelty, real life feels dull. A conversation feels boring compared to a viral video. A walk in nature feels empty compared to an endless feed of clips designed to grab your attention. So you turn back to the screen, back to the loop, and you wonder why you feel tired all the time, why you can't focus, why you don't want to do anything, even the things you once loved. It's not because you're unmotivated, it's because your system is overwhelmed, overstimulated. Frankl warned about this long before smartphones existed. He said that when life lacks meaning, people turn to pleasure, not true joy, just distraction, entertainment, numbing. But pleasure without purpose leads to emptiness, and emptiness creates addiction, not just to substances, but to stimulation itself. That's where most people are stuck now, addicted to stimulation, trapped in a cycle of input with no output, consuming without creating, absorbing without acting. It feels safer that way, because real action means risk. It means showing up in the world, facing failure, facing discomfort, facing yourself. It's easier to scroll, easier to watch other people live their lives than to live your own. But that's the cost of overstimulation. It robs you of your desire to act, and without action, meaning fades. Frankl said that humans can survive almost any how if they have a why. But today, most people don't have a why. They have distraction, they have stimulation, and they wonder why they feel hollow. It's not because you're broken, it's because you're trapped in the noise. And unless you break the cycle, the emptiness will grow. Let's pause for a second. Take a breath. Notice what happens when there's silence, when no new notification appears, no video autoplays, no scroll to distract you. Does it feel uncomfortable? That's the symptom of overstimulation. Stillness feels foreign, silence feels wrong, but it's not wrong. It's where life actually happens. The problem is, your brain has been rewired. Every time you pick up your phone, your mind expects a reward, a dopamine hit, a new piece of content to fill the gap. And when that reward doesn't come fast enough, you reach for the next thing. It's not your fault. The system was built this way, engineered to hijack your attention, designed to keep you clicking, tapping, swiping. But Viktor Frankl would tell you this: freedom starts when you stop reacting to the system, when you choose to create meaning instead of chasing stimulation. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. Passive consumption feels safe. It protects you from risk. When you're watching, you're not failing. When you're scrolling, you're not rejected. When you're consuming, you don't have to face the fear of trying. But the cost is heavy. You trade aliveness for comfort. You trade action for avoidance. And the more you do that, the emptier you feel. Because humans are not built to be passive. We're built to create, to build things, to shape the world in some small way. That's where meaning comes from. Not from thinking about life, but from participating in it. Frankl saw this clearly in the darkest moments of his life. In concentration camps, where everything was taken away, he realized something powerful. When you have nothing left, you still have the freedom to choose how you respond. And that response is what creates meaning. But overstimulation steals that choice. It keeps you so busy, so distracted, so caught in the loop of consumption that you forget to choose at all. You live on autopilot, scrolling, consuming, reacting, never stopping long enough to ask, what do I actually want from life? Because if you ask that question, the answer might scare you. Maybe you'd realize you're not living the life you want. Maybe you'd see how much time you've given to distraction. Maybe you'd have to change. And change is hard. So you stay in the loop, overstimulated, empty, trapped between too much input and too little action. Frankl warned about this psychological trap long before algorithms existed. He saw that people crave distraction when life feels meaningless, and distraction becomes addictive. It's easier to numb out than to face the deeper questions. Easier to scroll than to ask, why am I here? What matters to me? What am I building? But here's the thing. That emptiness you feel, it's not a flaw, it's not a failure, it's a signal, a call to action. It's your soul telling you, enough. Enough with the passive life. Enough with letting the world tell you what to think, feel, and do. It's time to reclaim your attention, not just as a productivity hack, not to get more done, but to get your life back. Because attention is life. Where you place your focus is where your life goes. And if you give all your focus to stimulation, you'll get more stimulation. But if you give your focus to meaning, you'll get more life. That's the real choice. Consume or create, react or respond, drift or decide. The system won't change, but you can. And it starts now. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing to Depthora and turning on the notifications so we can go deeper together. Let's get honest about something most people won't admit. It's easier to feel busy than to feel alive, because real life comes with uncertainty. When you create, you risk failure. When you build, you risk criticism. When you live fully, you risk losing things. That's why overstimulation is so seductive. It feels like life, but without the risk. You're always doing something, always scrolling, clicking, watching, but none of it asks anything from you. There's no danger, no discomfort, no responsibility. It's safe, but safety isn't meaning. Safety isn't purpose. And Viktor Frankl warned us about this trap. He said that when life becomes comfortable but meaningless, people suffer in a new way. They don't die from hunger or exposure. They die from apathy, from a slow erosion of their inner life. That's what's happening now. You're not burned out because you're too busy. You're burned out because you're too passive. You're tired of scrolling, tired of watching, tired of consuming, but you don't know how to stop, because the moment you stop, the emptiness comes rushing in, and no one taught you what to do with that emptiness. So you go back to the feed, back to the loop, back to overstimulation, and the cycle continues. But here's what Frankl would tell you. Emptiness isn't the enemy, it's the starting point. Meaning isn't something you find, it's something you create. And creation requires space, mental space, emotional space, spiritual space. When your life is filled with noise, there's no room for meaning. It's like trying to hear a whisper in the middle of a thunderstorm. You can't. So you have to turn down the volume, step away from the noise, reclaim your attention, and start asking deeper questions. What do I want to build? Who do I want to become? What am I willing to suffer for? Because meaning always involves some level of discomfort. It asks you to commit, to sacrifice, to invest your time and energy into something bigger than yourself. That's why overstimulation feels safer. It lets you avoid those questions, but it also robs you of life. Frankl believed that suffering is not what breaks people. Meaningless suffering breaks people. When you know why you're suffering, when you're choosing it for a purpose, you can endure almost anything. But when you suffer for nothing, when life feels like an endless loop of consumption and numbness, it destroys you from the inside. And that's what overstimulation does. It fills your life with noise, but leaves you empty. It keeps you busy, but disconnected. It gives you distraction instead of direction. So the first step out of the trap is simple, but not easy. Stop numbing out. Turn off the noise. Sit with the discomfort. Let the emptiness speak. Because underneath the numbness is something real, a desire for meaning, a longing for purpose, a call to live, not just consume. And that call won't go away. You can drown it out for a while, but eventually it will find you, usually in the quiet moments, late at night, when the scrolling stops. That's when you realize you're not just tired, you're empty, and no amount of stimulation will fill that void. Only meaning can, only creation can, only choosing to live your own life, not someone else's highlight reel, can. So the question is, are you ready to make that choice, or will you keep scrolling? Because life isn't going to wait. Let's talk about what happens when you finally stop. When you unplug. When you put down the phone. When you close the laptop and sit in silence. At first it feels like withdrawal. Your brain craves the next hit of stimulation. You feel restless, anxious, uncomfortable in your own skin. That's normal. You've trained yourself to expect constant input, and when the input stops, your mind doesn't know what to do. It panics. Because underneath the noise, there's something you've been avoiding. Your own life, your own thoughts, your own pain. And that's why overstimulation is so addictive. It lets you run from yourself. It lets you avoid the hard questions. But Viktor Frankl would remind you, the only way out is through. You can't numb your way to meaning. You have to face the silence. You have to sit in the stillness long enough to hear what your life is trying to tell you. That's where the real answers live. Not in another video, not in another scroll, not in another distraction. In the quiet. That's where you'll find the truth. Maybe the truth is that you're lonely, that you've built a life that looks good on the outside but feels hollow on the inside. Maybe the truth is that you're scared to start, scared to build, scared to fail. So you choose consumption over creation, because creation is risky, but consumption is safe, until it's not. Because at some point, the cost of staying passive becomes too high. You lose yourself. You forget what you care about, what excites you, what makes you feel alive. And that's the real danger. Not burnout from doing too much, but burnout from doing too little that matters. Frankl saw this in the people around him, survivors who had lived through the worst conditions imaginable, but then fell into despair because they had no purpose afterward. They had survived the camps, but now they had to survive freedom. And freedom is terrifying when you don't know what to do with it. Today, we face the same problem, just in a different form. We have more freedom than ever, more choices, more opportunities. But instead of using that freedom to create meaning, we drown in stimulation. We stay busy to avoid feeling lost. But busyness without purpose is just distraction. It fills the day, but empties the soul. So what's the solution? It's not to stop consuming altogether. You don't have to move to a cabin in the woods, but you do have to choose what you consume and how much. You have to create more than you consume, even if it's small. Write something, build something, help someone, say something real, because action creates meaning. Frankl said that meaning comes from three things: work, love, suffering. Work doesn't have to mean a job. It means contribution, doing something that matters to you. Love doesn't just mean romance. It means connection to people, to ideas, to something bigger than yourself. And suffering? It means embracing discomfort when it serves a higher purpose, not avoiding pain at all costs, but using it to grow. Overstimulation blocks all three. It keeps you passive, disconnected, numb. But you can break the cycle. It starts with one moment of choice, turning away from the screen, turning toward your life, choosing creation over consumption, connection over distraction, meaning over noise. That's where real motivation comes from, not from hacks, not from tricks, but from living a life that matters to you. So now what? You've seen the pattern. You've felt the trap. Overstimulation isn't just killing your attention. It's draining your life. It's numbing your sense of purpose. It's replacing meaning with noise. And Viktor Frankl warned us about this long before the age of smartphones. He saw that when life feels empty, people reach for distraction. They chase pleasure, comfort, entertainment, anything to avoid facing the void. But the void isn't the problem. The void is the invitation. It's the starting point for real life. Because meaning doesn't come from comfort. It comes from choosing to create when it's easier to consume, choosing to build when it's easier to scroll, choosing to connect when it's easier to isolate. That's where life begins again. When you stop chasing stimulation and start building something that matters. And here's the truth. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need to know your ultimate purpose right now. You just need to act, to move, to choose creation over consumption in this moment. Write the first sentence, make the first call, start the first project, even if it's messy, even if it's small, because action creates clarity. It wakes you up. It reconnects you to the world. Frankl said that when you lose yourself in meaningful work, you forget to ask about happiness. Because happiness isn't something you find. It's what happens when you're engaged in life. When you stop scrolling past it. When you stop numbing it out. When you stop waiting for someone else to give you a reason to live and choose one for yourself. That's the real warning Frankl left us. Not just about suffering, not just about survival, but about the danger of drifting, of letting life happen to you instead of through you. Overstimulation is the modern form of that drift. It keeps you trapped in reaction, in consumption, in noise. But you can break free right now by choosing to act, to create, to build, to connect. Even if it's uncomfortable, especially if it's uncomfortable, because that discomfort is where growth lives. It's where meaning starts. So the next time you feel the pull to scroll, to distract, to numb, pause. Ask yourself, what could I create instead? What could I build today that moves me closer to who I want to be? It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be real. Because life isn't waiting for you to be ready. It's happening now. And you have a choice. Stay overstimulated and empty, or step into the work of creating meaning. The choice is yours.